I will be presenting updates on the real economy. The latest developments point to signs that the global recession is bottoming out. The growth average for the whole body of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, has stopped contracting. In the second quarter, individual nations have exceeded expectations. The contraction in the United States was less steep than forecast. France and Germany have left the recession. For the first time in 5 quarters, Japan's economy grew. One can even speak of a V-shaped recovery in Asia. World trade is picking up, posting 2.5% growth in June, or the biggest gain in a year. We believe that while the global crisis is not over, the worst is over. In the Philippines, the economy continued to grow in the second quarter. Hence, we avoided recession. Backed by the mild easing of the global recession and by healthy domestic demand, gross domestic product rose by 1.5% in the second quarter, increased by 4.4% as the net factor income from abroad expanded by 29.7%, driven by overseas workers' remittances. In the region, the Philippines was one of the few economies that enjoyed positive growth rates. Others that grew include China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The rest still contracted. The Philippine economy's moderate expansion during the first half was broad-based. Almost all the sectors grew. The sole exception was manufacturing, which was dragged down by exports. The contraction in manufacturing was almost offset by the robust activity in construction and mining and quarrying. Agriculture was supported by the fishery, banana, and poultry industries. Services posted the strongest growth as trade, finance, and real estate continued to remain buoyant. Doomsayers have been saying that the Philippines would slip into recession, but this has not happened. The following factors help explain the country's resilience. One is that OFW remittances continue to grow and not to contract. The fact is, there is a real demand for Filipino skilled labor with or without a global recession. Unlike the Mexicans, Filipinos are well spread around the world, not dependent on any single nation. Today, it is the large chunk of workers in the less cyclical services sectors that have helped in holding up remittance inflows. Service providers like nurses are relatively more stable in the context of aging populations. Second, the Philippines' economic resiliency plan worked well in boosting growth. Public construction grew by 29.9% and government consumption by 9.1% in the second quarter. Take note that the inflation rate has sunk to new lows, and that is perking up private consumption. The low inflation environment has allowed Bangko Sentral to cut its policy rates to all-time lows as well. Then we see robust growth in certain subsectors. Exports of services are fueled by outsourcing and tourism. Competition and low airfares are driving growth in air transport. Retail trade benefits from low inflation. Agriculture supports fisheries, while surging metal prices are boosting growth in mining. Given the better-than-expected performance in the first semester and the improving prospects in the global and domestic arena, we expect the Philippine economy to attain the high end of the DBCC growth projections. Therefore, for the full year 2009 this year, we see 0.8 to 1.8% GDP growth and 2.1 to 3.1% GNP growth, also for the same year, 2009. What about the recent climate tragedies that befell the Philippines? The wrath of typhoons Ondoy and Pepeng resulted in damages worth so far 15.5 billion pesos. All other things being equal, the impact results in reduced GDP growth of 0.4 to 1.4% compared to the baseline of 0.8 to 1.8% growth for 2009. The greatest impact is on the agriculture sector. A more updated estimate of the damage on the agriculture sector will be presented later by Secretary Yap. However, to date, we are still maintaining the 0.8 to 1.8% forecast for 2009 due to certain counterfactors like stronger than expected remittances from overseas Filipino workers. We now would like to outline the measures to mitigate the economic damage from the typhoons. First, we have all the more reason to fast-track the implementation of the Economic Resiliency Plan, especially its social livelihood and infrastructure programs. Second, we must ensure that the funds raised for relief and rehabilitation will be spent prudently, especially for measures that have long-term development effects. Transparency in using the funds, including aid from international agencies and the private sector, is also important. Third, economic activities were interrupted due to the devastating effects of the storm. Thus, the national and local governments, with the help of ordinary citizens, must speed up their operations in cleaning the affected areas to minimize the disruption. Fourth, we must continue to stimulate private consumption, and a key strategy is to improve consumer confidence. That would entail upgrades in the weather warning system. It also helped to ensure well-implemented inflation expectations, to encourage microfinance loans, and to reduce borrowing constraints or entrepreneurial activities. Fifth, we must continue fueling the drivers of growth over the longer term. This means more investments in infrastructure, promoting our competitive sectors, prioritizing science and technology, and encouraging more research and development. Notwithstanding typhoons Ondoy and Pepeng, a sustained upturn is still expected for the rest of 2020.